I can get this to go. Okay, thank you for joining us today to talk about our urban heat island mapping campaign with a little feature about air quality as well. We're excited to talk to you today. My name is Tio Bowman. I'm a program planner in the sustainability office, and with us is Sarah Terry Cobo, the other half of the sustainability office. This was a project that took a lot of partners and a lot of friends to pull off, and so we're excited to talk about it, share the results with you today. And then also look into some of the deliverables that we have from consultants that lead to some very exciting action steps and next steps that we can take. So looking at our agenda for the day, we're going to start out with connecting this project to our sustainability plan, Adapt OKC. Then we'll look at what we know about extreme heat and what we can expect for the future of extreme heat in Oklahoma City. Then we'll dive right into the campaign, all the results, deliverables, and look at the air quality portions of the campaign that was both mobile and stationary, and then some exciting coming soon web pages that may be useful resources for you all. So again, in the summer of 2020, the City Council and Planning Commission approved our first sustainability plan in Oklahoma City called Adapt OKC. We're very excited to get to work on it, and in fact have been very busy implementing a lot of the policy recommendations that are across these 4 chapters of the plan. So we're excited to dive right into that natural and built environment chapter, where you can see that we had a specific recommendation about monitoring and reporting on the urban heat island conditions here in Oklahoma City. One way to inform action is to study it, and so that's where we want to start in better understanding our geographic context here in Oklahoma City. So what do we know right now about extreme heat in Oklahoma City, and what can we expect in the future? On the left side of the screen, you can see historical weather data from the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program that shows our average annual temperature is increasing. That trend line is going up from 1970 through 2020. That's a little over 50 years. And then on the left axis there, you can see that it's increased about 2 degrees on the average annual temperature. But looking on the right-hand side of the chart, you see that the South Central Climate Adaptation Sciences Center has provided some climate projection data to Oklahoma City about our extreme heat. And so you can see that our average annual temperature is set to increase a lot faster than that historical trend. And that means that we could have temperatures as high as 5.2 degrees on an average annual basis that are much warmer. And so what that translates to is about 28 more days over 100 degrees by mid-century, and that could be as soon as 2036. So an increase in that is quite a few more days of extreme weather. And just a rudimentary slide here for everyone to see a bell curve. But when you increase an average annual temperature, you're shifting that whole curve. So you see a lot more hot weather, a lot more record-breaking hot weather, longer periods of drought. And then it's not that we don't have any cold weather, as was evidenced by that 2021 Arctic blast that we had, but we expect to see a lot more extremes on the hot end of things. And the National Climate Assessment, the 5th National Climate Assessment that recently came out, also reflects this, but also says this is how this is going to affect our day-to-day lives. And one of those is electricity demand. And so our costs and maintenance that's needed to keep up with the cooling demand of these added extremely hot days is going to increase quite a bit. And so Oklahoma's quite a dark shade on both of these maps, showing that we're going to have quite a bit more demand for cooling capacity. And that's fine for some of us that have actual working AC units, but not everyone has those. And so that's something that we're concerned about and want to seek to find solutions for those of us that have less of a capacity to adapt. All of that heat also congregates around these asphalt surfaces. So impervious surfaces that are asphalt, concrete, it could be roads, buildings, rooftops, other infrastructure that absorbs heat throughout the day and then slowly radiates it throughout the night. So as we have these concentration of urbanized areas, that heat kind of feeds off of itself and creates a hotter area than other areas. So we wanted to really look at the distribution of this heat. Where do we have these hot spots of unprotected areas, and where could we improve potentially those? And so with a giant city, we kind of have to be strategic with resources. We have a city that's half the size of Rhode Island. We're 621 square miles. We're bigger than New York, bigger than Los Angeles, but much lower population densities. However, we still need roads to get around, and roads are one of piece of those of that infrastructure that contributes to the urban heat island effect. However, there are other aspects of our infrastructure that also may be more manageable and more controllable than needing to have roads. And one of those is parking lots. So roads are necessary for daily life, but certain impervious surfaces like parking lots are being assessed so that we could better right size parking lots for new developments. The number of spaces that are needed on a regular basis, it may not be what it used to be in the 80s or 90s or even 70s when some of these recommendations were developed. But minimum parking standards have made a contribution to our city, and part of that contribution is they cover more than 4% of that entire land area that we have, and so that's a huge amount of area that's just used for storing cars, absorbing heat, and then also negatively contributing to stormwater runoff when we have some inundation events. So again, putting a finer point on this, we borrowed an infrared camera from the Oklahoma City Fire Department, a handheld device, and we're able to demonstrate the temperature of a very hot surface parking lot, and pointing the other side to under a shade tree on some turf grass. So you can see a pretty stark difference here between those two areas. So again, I don't know if we necessarily have to put a point on that, but it does show how wide that range can vary. And why, if you don't have any respite at all, you just have those surface parking lots or you just have asphalt surfaces, how it can be really disorienting and challenging for folks with particular heat sensitivities. And again, why heat matters so much, a lot of people die from it. And in fact, more so than any other natural disaster, heat kills more people annually. Very big concern for the city, not only for our outdoor workers, for example, but also for residents. Outdoor workers like city utilities staff, they repair water and sewer lines, and they have to respond to those line breaks no matter what the weather is. And so it doesn't matter if we're on the end of a 20 days in a row of 100-degree weather, they have to be out there repairing water lines, repairing sewer lines in case of a break. And so that increases risk to staff, and that's a thing that we're also seeking to influence and try to make better by better understanding this problem. Capacity to adapt may mean that having lower income or fewer resources to improve your insulation or repair your air conditioning systems, or you may be renting without the ability to make improvements. And so all of these folks have disproportionate impacts of a really big extreme heat issue that affects everyone, but does affect other people, certain people, more so than others. So looking at the health impacts, if you are predisposed to having heart disease, you have chronic lower respiratory illnesses, you've got asthma, for example, you're going to be more affected by extreme heat than others, and need to spend less time outside, probably whenever it's even not quite to 100 degrees. But if you look at Oklahoma State's health scorecard, we're not in a good area. We're not in a good place for any of those. And so that just means that we have a high vulnerability. There are a lot of residents that will have a high vulnerability to extreme heat. So it's something we need to pay particular attention to, but then also prioritize where we're applying these treatments and solutions that we may be talking about later in the presentation. Again, heat is important. But however, when you add just that temperature number to Oklahoma's humid subtropical climate, that relative humidity mix creates when you mix the temperature and the relative humidity, you get a heat index. And so as you can see from the stair step chart, even on a 90-degree day, if you have only 60% humidity, you're feeling that like it's 100. So thinking about those 28 extra days that reach 100, you don't need much humidity in the air for it to feel abnormally hot and extremely hot and actually unsafe and dangerous for a lot of folks. Again, just a final note on extreme heat from the National Climate Assessment Report. Extreme heat is already recognized as a threat to outdoor activities and negatively influencing how and for how long folks can participate in outdoor sports, particularly high school kids. This report also points to modifying timing, location, intensity, and monitoring activities as an adaptation measures that can reduce that risk. So there are real tangible actions that can be put in place today to help protect kids as they participate in these sports. Very important for their health to be able to participate in sports, but also important for their health to monitor when and for how long that's happening. Okay, So diving straight into the campaign, this is one of the most exciting projects we got to work on. But given that there's two of us in the sustainability office, we need a lot of partners to help support a project of this scale. And so a huge thank to all the organizations shown on the screen here, and a special shout out to Metropolitan Library System and the Parks and Recreation Department for graciously hosting our heat hubs that we'll talk a little bit about in just a few slides. But then another especially huge shout out to our funding partners. They were able to increase our original award from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, by more than 75%. And so that allowed us to expand the study area that we were looking at for the heat and air quality, include air quality in that study, conduct a public survey, and a lot more synthesis and reporting that would not have been part of the original award. So the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, or ACOG, the Department of Environmental Quality, and the Oklahoma City Community Foundation were instrumental partners in making this campaign and this project and all of the deliverables possible. So looking at our places of interest, this is on the left side, you'll see the project area. We worked with our steering committee to set a 350 square mile project area that was the same footprint as a 2019 tree canopy study. And within that area, we identified more than 200 places of interest that would help inform our driving routes, where folks are going to be attaching sensors to their cars. So we wanted to make sure they're going by places that could be extremely hot, or some places that may be well shaded and very cool, so we could capture that temperature difference, all the highs and the lows. We also targeted areas where vulnerable people might be, so hospitals, senior centers, schools, and public housing facilities. We were able to focus on the vulnerable populations in Oklahoma City thanks to a project that was developed in partnership with 3 different schools at the University of Oklahoma. This companion project developed a heat vulnerability index for Oklahoma City census tracts from 2015 all the way through 2020. So we have 5 different sets of these. They're all available on data.okc.gov, the city's open data portal. And that index includes factors that are related to 3 critical areas. So sensitivities to heat, adaptive capacity, and exposure. So all of those places of interest were formed by our consultant into driving routes, and this helped our more than 250 volunteers collect mobile data across our entire project area. It was quite an effort to coordinate all of this. They all met up at those heat hubs that were at libraries or parks and recreation facilities, got their sensors, brought their sensors back. Everything went extremely smoothly on the coordination side. And folks were able to attach, as you can see, the hammer-looking device is similar to the one we used. It has temperature and humidity sensors inside, and then the one that looks like a little Pac-Man ghost on the rear window, that was an air quality monitors that were collecting air quality readings on some of the routes. So before the campaign even started, we had a ton of coverage. This was a very hot summer, and extreme heat was receiving a lot of attention in the media. So that helped, but it also helped with our recruiting efforts. So we were grateful for the coverage that this was able to generate, and the awareness that this was able to raise about the issue of extreme heat and the effects on people. And just to give a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of our process for selecting the date that we chose, so it was August the 12th. We used historical weather trends to find a day that was high probabilities for very hot weather and dry weather. We even tapped into the National Weather Service. Huge shout out to them for their participation and help throughout in the build up to the campaign and during the day of. So we received regular reports that looked like this, and it would have a check mark if it met all the conditions and what approximate temperatures we would be aiming for. So everything, even 3 days out, was pointing to a very hot, perfect day to be recording this. However, we live in Oklahoma, and things can be unpredictable, as you all well know. So on campaign day, we unfortunately had some lingering clouds and precipitation that suppressed the heat island effect just a little bit. That's okay, because one of the main purposes of this project was to see the distribution of heat. So whether the temperatures were at 99 compared to 81, or 89 or 95 to 81. It still shows which areas are hotter and which areas are not holding on to as much of that heat island effect. So you can see from the dashed lines, those are when we started each of our 3 routes that we drove, morning, afternoon, and evening. And particularly in the evening, we went ahead and moved that up with the advice of National Weather Service as they saw some more rainfall and potentially higher winds coming into play. So we're very grateful we did that too, because as you can see, the spike in wind speeds probably would have even further kind of juked the stats a little bit on that evening routes. So with that said, these are all of the traverses for the morning, afternoon, and evening. And it's extremely important to point out that this campaign was a major success. We were able to run all of the routes, collect all of the information, and provide a very clear picture on the distribution of heat within this 350 square mile area. The data shows that the temperatures can vary widely across Oklahoma City at the same time of day, creating this disproportionate exposure that we've talked about before about extreme heat. So the morning temperatures are extremely important to point out here because it shows that heat that's left over. It didn't have time to generate from this day. It's left over from the night before and from the day before. So it doesn't have time to cool down overnight before the next day's heat arrives. And so that's why when you have these heat waves of 7 days, 12 days in a row, that heat just builds upon each other and it never really has time for any amount of the environment to cool down. The maximum temperature difference, important to point out, was also recorded in the morning, and that was a 14-degree difference, 14.7, almost 15. So that is nearly double what the EPA had estimated on the urban heat island slide. That just goes to show that, again, that's a conservative estimate, and so conditions can vary widely across our city. So the consultant took those traverse routes, they took the data points and smoothed those into a model. So they have a model that shows the averages. You can include humidity in there to get a heat index model as well. All the layers are accessible through some sites that we'll show at the end. And you'll be able to zoom in. You can see this on okc.gov/extreme heat right now. It's embedded there. So you can see the map in person. You can zoom all the way in. And when you zoom in to look at some of the hotter areas, there are certain areas that you can really get a clear picture on what those characteristics of the ground and what the land uses, how they're contributing to the urban heat island effect, or how they're helping cool and mix the air. So if you're looking at this area, this is some points that are south of downtown near I-35 with a pretty dramatic contrast between an older neighborhood with mature trees compared to a nearby industrial area. That's this red area where you can see Acres Avenue on the right side. So looking at that through the data points, you may have to squint a little bit to see the yellow ones on the left side. But those are much lower temperature readings that you see come through compared to the east side of I-35 there that are very bright red. And so part of the reason for this, and each of those are individual data points. So we collected nearly 250,000 of these throughout the whole campaign, and those were used to inform the models that we showed earlier. So street level views highlight the importance of having vegetation, and not just vegetation, but mature trees. So this is on that west side of I-35. This is an older neighborhood that has very, very mature trees. And so it significantly is cooler compared to the other side of I-35, where there was a lot of industrial area, not as much time for those trees to grow, and very little minimal natural areas to kind of break up all of that asphalt and industrial uses. So some things made perfect sense once you look at it on a street view. One of our partners, the Oklahoma Forestry Services, use their drones. They have drones they use for spotting hotspots and wildfires. And they were able to come out on a very hot day. I think it was August the 26th of last year of 2023, where it was extremely hot that day. They were able to take their drones to various parts of the city and take some snapshots. This is an aerial of a portion of the school at Douglas High School, where you can see the irrigated parts of the turf on the inside of the track is really performing much better for cooling than the compacted Bermuda grass that has been walked on, not irrigated. It's probably died several weeks before this. And so it's nearly has the same temperature profile as the track itself in certain areas. And so important to point out, it's not all vegetation is created equal, but shade does carry the weight here. And so if we can hone in on that point just a little bit more, many of you are probably recognize these circles from Scissortail Park, which again is serving a huge heat island mitigation service in downtown, where we had very hot temperatures, a lot of impervious surfaces, a lot of buildings absorbing heat. So this giant park that voters approved to invest in our city to put this here, this is serving already a tremendous amount of service. But looking at it through that infrared camera, you can see those circles that are actually bioswales and receiving rainwater as well. They're planted with native plants, and around them you can see plants that are allowed to grow and not be mowed down super low and not be compacted. There's a little area towards the top where you can see a lot of folks walk and maybe hang out and picnic there. So that's an area where it's been more downtrodden, and you can see that temperature profile. Another thing to point out is the play area. The playground is actually an artificial surface, so it shows up very clearly in this infrared image that despite it being green in color, it's not actually doing much for the cooling of that playground. So shade structures may be something to look at in a situation like that to help protect those children, not just from exposure to sun, but also future development of skin cancers and things like that. So really want to hone in on the plant choices and the management of and management practices employed here, and the differences that makes in how the heat profiles viewed from above. So again, these are areas that are allowed to go natural, and the plants can survive. These are drought tolerant plants that can withstand more of those extreme heat temperatures, and so choosing native and adapted plants can really make a huge difference in the amount of heat your landscapes are contributing or contributing to the mitigation of the heat island effect. So that was pretty much the synopsis of how we did the campaign. Our consultant got to work right away, working with us here in the sustainability office to produce some deliverables. So these are extremely exciting. Again, all of these are available on okc.gov/extreme heat, where you can find all the reports, studies, surveys, and guides that were used, that were developed stemming from this campaign. So first, summary report. This covers the basic process, methodology, and data collected during the campaign. So this one is available. The jurisdictional scan was an add-on that was available through our funding partners. So this includes an overview of existing policies. It takes a deep look at some specific plans that are listed here. Several studies. It has recommendations and codes. So it synthesizes all of these and is able to identify which ones are intended to or could address the effects of extreme heat. So these are areas that may give us starting points, or it may give us areas where we could improve and be a little bit more aggressive in the strategies we use. One very exciting deliverable is the Heat Mitigation and Adaptation Guidebook. So here you can just see the contents of it. It does focus on trees to begin with, and has a very interesting piece of that chapter 2, where it looks at the limitations of just using trees as our only strategy. Trees are going to be a very important part of any strategy that we use for extreme heat, but it's going to be very important to have a multifaceted approach to mitigating heat, because when you plant a new tree, it does take several years to get that to a point where we're getting the benefits of those. So combinations of strategies are going to be very important. And so again, I encourage you to dive into this and take a look, because I know we will be and we'll be using it to guide our work going forward. I really loved also that the guidebook broke the strategies into community scale. That's things the city or our partners could do, and then also household scale. So things that residents can employ, insulation and venting, and making your house more energy efficient. The way you manage your outdoor vegetation, planting trees and watering them and maintaining them. So all of these things are going to be very helpful to either protect yourself and or help minimize the contributions to this urban heat island effect from your property. And then finally, looking at co-benefits, this was a great chart that the consultant developed to show on one axis how many environmental co-benefits are included in any of these given strategies. So the co-benefits refer to natural hazards and needs that are addressed other than heat, that can be addressed by these solutions. So those might be stormwater or flood management, air quality, carbon capture, wildlife habitat, all of these things that contribute something good. Some of them do a lot more of them than others. And then on the bottom axis, you can see how long it will take to realize those benefits. So planting trees, it's going to have a lot of co-benefits, but it's going to take a long time to realize those. However, if you look at preserving the existing trees we have, takes very little time to realize those benefits because we're saving what's already there. However, those trees are still doing stormwater benefits. They're cleaning the air, and they're allowing for that air mixing that's contributing to that cooling a little bit. One thing to point out with our humidity here is that trees can't really help with that. They can't really help with the humidity factor and that heat index. So we need to, again, have a multifaceted approach of having shaded areas and trees and response mechanisms so that folks can access resources whenever they are feeling heat stress. Okay, so moving into the next, this is our summer heat survey report. I've got a few slides here just to show a few results of this and a few things that that jumped out to us as important. So this survey examined where residents are most exposed to and impacted by summer heat and air pollution, how residents perceive summer conditions in OKC, heat risk, how they perceive personal preparedness, residents' attitudes about trees and green space, other measures the city might take to help mitigate the heat island effect, and then also what's their current existing knowledge of urban heat and the effects on people. So more than 2,000 people responded to this. Thank you again. Huge thank you to the zoo. The OKC Zoo helped us distribute this and help provide incentives to some zoo experiences that were fantastically helpful in helping get a lot of responses. 2,000 people completely blew our expectations out of the water. And so out of those, we took about 200 that were identified in strategic or in specific zip codes that were either highly vulnerable or very low vulnerability from our heat vulnerability index. And the consultant took a deeper dive into those to look at the results. And so that's where you get the low HVI and the high HVI that you see on the screen. And again, summers have gotten hotter in OKC. Heat waves in OKC last longer than they used to. Everyone's kind of picking up on this. They're feeling the effects of the heat. It's not hard. It's hard to not notice, right? So whether you're highly vulnerable or low vulnerability, you're feeling it. However, that green bar is higher than the blue bar. So people that are highly vulnerable, this is just another layer of data to help support that vulnerability index. It's telling us that these people are feeling it more than people who are in low vulnerability in zip codes. So expanding those questions over to trees and green space, energy efficiency, residents broadly support trees and green space. The ones that responded to the survey, I should say, they're very supportive of more trees and green space in OKC, very supportive of rules for buildings, energy efficiency, requiring more tree canopy for new developments, and then also improving maintenance of trees and green space on public property, very supportive of doing that as well. So folks from zip codes with high heat vulnerability index feel more negatively affected by heat and air pollution while they're in their homes and while they're at work. So that's the takeaway from this slide. Where do you feel negatively affected by summer heat and by air pollution? That green bar is significantly higher than the blue bar on both of those questions. And so that's something that we take to heart and we're very concerned about, and we want to develop strategic responses to that. But again, part of that may be more monitoring and more understanding of where exactly air pollution is spiking and then ways that we can help with response to that. One other deliverable that we have, which is kind of everything, you can download all of this data. So we have an open source data portal that's available. Again, this link is available on okc.gov/extremeheat, where you can download all of those traverse points. You can download all the individual data points yourself and map them through GIS. And so all of that's available. You can reach out to us if you have any issues with accessing it, but all available for everyone. And then finally, there is one of my favorite parts of these deliverables is a summary of assessments and services. This is that synthesis and reporting that was added on by our funding partners. But it really goes through all activities performed, including methods, participants, findings, conclusions. And each of the 5 activities has a dedicated report or deliverable, including a complete account of processes and outcomes, which can be referenced at any time for more information. And so some key recommendations include developing an urban forestry plan, creating clear policies for protecting existing trees, and continuing to invest in public transit improvements, which in fact, a press release just went out yesterday talking about MAPS 4, including $11.2 million to improve approximately 500 of the system's 1,400 bus stops. So that's already a thing that's happening. Embark is getting funds through MAPS 4, again, approved by voters, that's ultimately, it wasn't pitched as this, but this is a climate adaptation measure. So this is a way that the city is helping residents that maybe don't have transportation of their own and have to rely on the public transit system. They're going to have better shade available to them while they're waiting for the bus to get to work or to home or to school. A few more recommendations included pursuit of renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, of course, because of that electricity demand associated with extreme heat. And then also updates to our building and energy codes that can help affect private development so that they're being built to more efficient standards so that they're ready for the heat that's to come, not for the current conditions. Okay, so shifting now to the air quality portion of the project. We drive a lot in Oklahoma City. It's no surprise. So 85+% of our commutes are all single occupancy vehicles. That's one, I mean, you've probably seen an image like this if you drive to work and home. So all of what that means is just more tailpipe emissions. Those are important because those contribute to formation of ground level ozone or smog. And so this is particularly dangerous for vulnerable people, all those populations that we talked about before, seniors, young kids, but especially those with asthma. And in Oklahoma, more than 1 in 10 people have asthma, and they are more negatively affected by tailpipe emissions. So air quality is important for public health, but it's also important for our economy because if our region exceeds allowable thresholds that are established by the EPA for those ozone-forming emissions that come from tailpipes, there could be major cost implications. In fact, one of our funding partners, ACOG, they conducted a study that pulled some money from several other sources that estimated up to $15.2 billion in costs over 30 years if our central Oklahoma region goes non-attainment, which is exceeding those thresholds. So that could have a very big impact on a place that relies on federal transportation dollars to do a lot of our road maintenance of that entire road network that we talked about earlier. So for that reason, we wanted to really include air quality in this. So Department of Environmental Quality, air quality section of that department, or excuse me, of that agency, and ACOG and the Oklahoma City Community Foundation helped us add on air quality sensors to the mobile routes. And then we also got to hang on to those for a few extra weeks so that we could put them in stationary locations too. And what they were monitoring, this is a type of sensor, a low-cost sensor called an air beam that was used in the study, and it tracks particulate matter 2.5 microns in diameter. And so the PM 2.5 is not visible to a human eye, and it's actually smaller than a human hair, as you can see there. That size is what's allowed it to get into our lungs and our respiratory systems and cause these health issues. So we also have a summary report related to specifically the air quality side of the study that shows both where the stationary sensors were located and then all of the traverses for our mobile campaign. So just for a glance, you can see the number of days of PM 2.5 over 12 and then some weird symbols. That actually stands for a concentration of 1 micron over M3. That means 1 cubic meter of air contains 1 microgram of that pollutant, which in this case is PM 2.5. So that will come back into play in a couple of slides. To test the viability and consistency of the low-cost sensors, we also co-located sensors with DEQ's regulatory monitoring stations. So Department of Environmental Quality are the ones who record and they standardize all of the sensors that they use. They send all of that data to the EPA, and that's what establishes what our design values are related to that threshold. So we wanted to make sure that these lower cost sensors are actually tracking with the way that the DEQ sensors are recording air quality. And in fact, they correlated very well. You can see that the air beam did have a wider variety, wider range of temperature readings, or excuse me, of air quality readings. But that's probably due to sensitivity of the sensors inside and the design of the housing. There were several factors that probably contributed to that. But also the correlation, as it correlated closely, this means that it could be helped. Like these could be used to help fill those gaps in the regulatory monitoring, because there's only about 4 or 5 of those in the area they're helping us understand what our air quality is. So painting a more granular picture can help us again have a better understanding of where our air quality disparities are in our city. So it's important to note that extreme values that might be related to roadway vehicles or point source emissions are not excluded from the mobile data set. So these are considered accurate measurements. They reflect real conditions because they were collected along those traverses, and they would be experienced by a human, that's walking down a sidewalk at that area too. So looking in on this area where we have a few hazardous readings, we've got some red dots, a few purples. We really wanted to hone in and kind of see if we could identify what's causing these. So zooming in, you can kind of see we're near I-40, and there's kind of an industrial area. Apologies for the resolution of this map. But as we look at an aerial image, we can kind of see the red dot is where these temperatures, or excuse me, where these air quality readings were gathered. The purple box is a power plant. The yellow box is a big landfill. But also everything around there. The I-40 generates a lot of truck traffic, a lot of heavy trucks, semi-trucks using diesel. There's a distribution warehouse to the south there, a lot of business parks that are generating that heavy truck traffic. So where you see a lot of that, that's going to be a lot higher readings of particulate matter. And so that's, it seems to make sense that this was one of the areas that had, from the mobile campaign, some hazardous readings on a regular basis. So stationary sensors, we placed these largely at fire stations. There were a few at DEQ monitoring stations. Two of those that we had were elevated for two of the stations were elevated for 12 of the days that they were out, which was about 14 days or so, 21 days. Meaning that there were 12 micrograms of PM 2.5 within each cubic meter of air at those locations. So according to the EPA, when PM 2.5 measurements reach a 24-hour average of 12 to 35 microns per cubic meter of air, sensitive individuals should avoid outdoor activity. So 12 is kind of that kicker. It's that line where the EPA is recognizing that has more hazardous events or more hazardous impact on folks than lower readings than that. The sensor that had the lowest PM 2.5 reading over the stationary study was Airbeam 31, located at station number 35. This is in the Rivendell neighborhood with an average reading of 9. I pointed out the wrong one. It's way down here, 31. It had an average reading of 9 micrograms per PM 2.5 per cubic meter of air. And then the highest one was actually Airbeam number 26 that was at fire station number 16 at McCracken Park. And so this is in the Cloverleaf neighborhood with an average PM 2.5 reading of 13.2 micrograms per cubic meter of air. So we ran an EJ screen report. This is a tool from the EPA that helps you map and understand environmental justice considerations of any given area. So you can set a pin and drop a buffer around it. So we put a 1 mile buffer around this fire station 16. And what we found was there are a couple visible here. One's a Head Start where very young kids play, and then also at elementary school, very close to that fire station, and a parks facility with some tennis courts. But that EJ screen report showed that there's even more within a mile. So there's 8 schools, there are 12 places of worship, and 1 hospital, Surgical Hospital of Oklahoma, that's located within this 1 mile. That area also ranked in the 88th percentile in the state and 90th percentile in the state for low income status. It ranked in the 88th percentile in the state and 93rd percentile in the state for asthma rates. And it was in this is the most staggering one, a 96th percentile in the state and 97th percentile in the US for lacking health insurance. 28%, nearly 1/3 of the people in this area are lacking health insurance. And so all those things are cascading effects that kind of stack on top of each other. And again, are real cause for concern and real cause for reasons that we need to monitor and understand better the distribution of air quality levels in our city. So some key conclusions or takeaways, kind of covered these through the slides, but there are disparate levels of exposure by location. Our city is big, it's varied, it has different landscapes. Some areas are better vegetated than others, and some have more exposure to industrial areas. And so we're going to be more exposed depending on the location. The second takeaway is that the Airbeam and the DEQ West regulatory station tracked very closely in their measurements. So that's encouraging for using lower cost sensors that may be able to help us fill some of those gaps. And then also acknowledging those gaps, that there are gaps that persist in the long-term air quality monitoring networks across the city. What DEQ has is required, and so what we can do, we won't be able to afford the stations that they have throughout the city, and those are very expensive to calibrate. And they spend a tremendous amount of time and expertise on keeping those accurate and where they are. So whatever we can do and our partners can do to help better paint a picture of what air quality looks like across the city will be a big help. So again, some quick plugs. One, to Department of Environmental Quality. You can sign up for air quality notifications from DEQ, where you can get day ahead forecasts, or you can get real-time data for any given day related to air quality. Very helpful maps. And then also ACOG offers text notifications for ozone alert days. So you can get notified if it's going to be one of those days. If you have asthma, you might want to be particularly paying attention to those. And so it helps people manage their outdoor exposure on poor air quality days. Finally, we've got a couple of exciting things coming up. So an urban heat health story map that we've been working on. The Information Technology Department was gracious enough to let us use some credits that we had stored up from our enterprise license to do a story map and to do a resource hub. So we've got an urban heat health hub that will be published very soon, that will have resources for folks. We'll be working with OG&E to help promote cooling center locations, and are excited to get this information in front of folks so they can better understand the connections between heat and health and the disproportionate impact therein. So one other way you can get involved in ways that we're working in the planning department is a development codes update project where we'll have considerations about tree preservation. Remember, it had high co-benefits for environmental co-benefits and very low time to implement. So we can start saving trees today with very low cost outlays compared to planting new trees and waiting for decades. So other considerations will be related to anything to do with parking requirements, anything to do with private developments that may exacerbate or may help with the heat island. So again, you can get involved by emailing codeupdate@okc.gov or by visiting the website okc.gov/codeupdate. And with that, this is our contact information for Sarah and I, a cheeky little cartoon to remind folks that hot temperatures have not been going up and down for centuries. And in fact, those frogs are in danger. So yeah, with that, that's the presentation. We can take some questions, and I can stop sharing my screen now. I think Eric had from ACOG had a few things to share as well. Stopping share and stopping recording, I think. Okay. Eric, did you want to, are you able to share your screen?
Sure. I think you did cover a lot of it, but I'll
okay.
pull up something really quick. So as you mentioned, ACOG is historically our involvement. You heard about the DEQ regulatory side. We're all completely on the voluntary side. Definitely sign up for ozone alerts if you haven't already. If you're watching this, that's the best way to be informed of what's going to come the next day. So it's really about protecting public health, especially for seniors and children and folks with respiratory illness. But it's also about individuals taking action to reduce emissions on those elevated ozone days. One of the things that we're trying to do at ACOG, we're taking sort of a three-pronged approach, and you heard Tio talk about our cost and non-attainment study and trying to quantify what our economic risks are of having bad air quality, essentially. One of the things so that's part of it, but we're going through a planning process. The Ozone Alert Day program has for a long time been focused on individual actions. And I think we have a realization that we have to really scale that up to go toward more organizational level action, both in the public and private sector. State agencies like DEQ have some great programs in place that are trying to do that. So we have a couple plans that we're going through right now. One is a regional air quality plan, looking at what are the sources of PM2.5 ozone emissions. What's our inventory of where those emissions are coming from, And then what are the actions we can take as a region to reduce those emissions? And so that's on the criteria pollutant sign. And then what you see on your screen is the EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So both at the state level and at the local level and regional level here in Oklahoma City, we're going through a climate planning process looking at greenhouse gases and carbon. We have released our priority climate action plan earlier this spring, so folks can take a look at that on our website. We applied for some federal funding to look at to hopefully get to that implementation side where we're looking at specifically the transportation sector, the building sector, and tree planting, some of the things that Tio talked about earlier in the presentation. So that's what we're doing at ACOG, and always happy to work with the city and everybody else that is looking at how we can improve our air quality.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Jacqueline, did you want to say any comments about Embark's efforts, or no pressure? You don't have to, but you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing a few things. So in partnership with ACOG on some of their programs, Embark has been working on a priority that was put into place in 2016 by our governing body, the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. The board put that initiative in place to remove all diesel buses from our fleet. And we are on track to at least get the fixed route buses complete. We have all funding in place to replace those over the next few years. We're working on the paratransit vans, but since the craziness in 2020, we are a little bit behind just due to stock and things like that. So as Tio also mentioned, we are upgrading 500 bus stops with shelters. We are also working on trying to find funding to help with 10 miles of sidewalk around that. There are over roughly 2,500 miles of sidewalk missing in the city. So just trying to make the city more accessible to transit and also walking or biking is really important to reducing those vehicle miles in order to help air quality. As we expand our services, we just help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and the broader climate change and the air pollution. So when we become more accessible, the community benefits through cleaner air. So that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you to Embark and COPPA for their commitment to air quality in Central Oklahoma. It's a huge thing to take the diesel buses off the road. They're on the road all day, all the time. And so a huge impact there. So again, Sarah, do we have any questions?
I just had one question come through so far, and that was, is there a map that has the tree canopy overlaid on those smoothed maps, the temperature model maps from that heat study, to see if there's a correlation there?
So I am working on that. We don't have it published yet, and that's why I didn't throw it in the slides today, but that is well in the works and should be available soon. We'll put it on okc.gov/extreme heat. That's the fourth mention.
Excellent. And if anybody else has questions, you're welcome to raise your hand or just come off of mute and ask questions. There's only a little bit more than a dozen of us here, so it shouldn't be too